So, with the release of Deadpool and Wolverine and the long break between now and the next time we really get another Marvel movie, we have almost 6 months, right? 7 months? I think the next time we get a new one is in February with Captain America, New World Order. I wanted to do my ultimate MCU tier list. Now, I made a video kind of like this a year ago, ranking out the MCU. This one, I'm just going to be doing a big, gigantic tier list with every single MCU project that I could think of. I might have forgotten one because, goddammit, there are so many of these things out there that they're hard to remember, but I have watched and seen every single thing that's going to be on this list, and I'm going to rank them out, tell you my favorites, which ones I think are great movies, which ones I think are good movies, okay movies, and which ones are the steaming piles of shit that we unfortunately had to force ourselves to watch. Now sit back, kick up your feet, relax, enjoy. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, turn on notifications to see everything I post when I post them. And let's get started. Now you see here we have the whole tier list. We got all these movies right here. So let's see. We got A tier, S tier, B tier, the normal tier list shit. You know what we're doing here. First up is Iron Man, the original Iron Man film, the one that started the MCU, the one that kind of birthed this new generation, this new era of superhero movies. It came out all the way back in 2008. Little Joey over here was 7 years old. Can you believe that shit? 7 years old! And I saw this thing in theaters. I remember it like it was yesterday. Directed by Jon Favreau, this is the type of movie we call a miracle, because making it felt like the impossible. They were envisioning a big, grand Avengers universe while making this film, which is hard to believe at the time. It had never been done in cinema before, and making this movie was a milestone on its own. They made it with essentially no script. They were just kind of improvising most of the production of this film. There were a lot of challenges that went into making this one. There's a great book out there called MCU, The Reign of the Marvel Universe, or something like that. You're seeing it on your screen right now. It's a great book that outlines pretty much the production of all of these films, but this one in particular was fascinating. It is a great film. It's our introduction to Tony Stark, one of the most iconic characters in the superhero genre. Robert Downey Jr. making his debut, resurrecting his career, is obviously iconic here. This film doesn't age particularly well, but is it the film's fault? Is this a bad film? It's just no. To me, no. The reason the film doesn't age well is because this film has been remade about 20,000 times. A bunch of those remakes are on this list, and we're going to talk about them. But this format of film, this style of superhero story, this structure has been used like a perfect example of how to make a superhero movie, and now it's been done to death. Therefore, watching this movie in 2024, it doesn't feel as good. It doesn't look as well. But it's still a really, really great movie that I will be putting in A tier, the top of A tier for now, because it's the only movie on the list. So yeah, it's number one, baby. Iron Man's number one. The Incredible Hulk, our first steaming pile of shit. Another film that came out all the way back in 2008, a film that feels like the least MCU film probably on this list, starring Ed Norton as Bruce Banner. This is one that's just kind of boring. I mean, there aren't a lot of Hulk movies out there. We haven't gotten a Hulk movie since, and this is one that's just not that interesting. There are moments of dark character moments with the Hulk, of accepting this life, of being this gigantic creature that cannot die, that I do find well done. I actually really like Ed Norton's version of this character, and I wish we got to see more. Not that I don't like Mark Ruffalo, but Ed Norton's great. I like Tim Roth a lot. I don't really like him in this film. I don't love the love story here. And this is just not one of my favorite, Marvel movies. It's definitely one of the more forgettable ones, and I think everybody can agree with that because most people forget this movie when they're talking about the MCU. I never see anybody talk about this one. Except for Kevin Feige. He always brings it up. He always wants to remind us that he did, in fact, make this movie. This movie was produced by him, and I don't know why. Let go, Kevin. It's not a good movie. So we'll put Incredible Hulk in D tier. Why do we have E tier? We can get rid of E tier. Delete row. We don't need that. We just need F. There will be 1 or 2 Fs. Iron Man 2. Jon Favreau comes back to direct a sequel to Iron Man, the first sequel in the MCU, and definitely a step down from the first movie, but still a solid Marvel movie. I rewatched this one recently, and I remembered it being a lot worse than it actually is. It's fine. Our first movie with Don Cheadle playing War Machine. He's great in this role. We get more of Robert Downey Jr. Just kicking ass as Tony Stark. More of a love story in this one. More about the common question of if this technology existed in our world, how would world governments deal with this? Sam Rockwell plays an over-the-top, cringy villain that everybody hates. Can't wait to see him come back, though. And Mickey Rourke just sucks in this. His character is just awful. This is just an okay movie, though. The action's alright. I enjoyed the third act more than I remembered enjoying it, and this movie just gets a lot of hate, but yet again, forgettable. We will give Iron Man a C tier. Iron Man 2. Thor, another movie that gets a lot of hate. I remember watching this years and years ago and absolutely disliking this movie so much I thought it was the worst thing pretty much ever. In retrospect, rewatching it, it's fine. It's a good introduction to Thor. It's a movie that takes itself way too seriously, but Asgard is a really cool place to be. It looks good visually for the time. Chris Hemsworth is great in the role. Tom Hiddleston is Loki. Very, very different Thor movie than the modern ones we've been getting, but still a movie that I think is a little underappreciated, overhated, but definitely not underrated. What I mean is it's, you know, a C tier. We'll put it ahead of Iron Man 2. Captain America: The First Avenger, another movie that's forgotten and one that I will call underrated. This is a great movie. It is a World War II kind of period piece set in the MCU, something we don't get a lot of, these weird period pieces. And we get our introduction to Chris Evans as Captain America, arguably the best casting in the MCU outside of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He's so good in this role. He captures this kind of spiritual patriot of American pride. He's so good. He's like the modern-day Hulk Hogan, just without, you know, saying the N-word and all that stuff.
Enough was enough!
Cap is a badass in this film. He's great as just a character that both emulates this beacon of hope for the characters in the movie, but also just the beacon of leadership in the Marvel Universe. I really like the villain here in Red Skull. This movie has a lot going for it. It is a little boring at times, a little too long, but it's still a better movie than a lot of the other stuff we got in Phase 1. So we will go B tier for the first Avenger. And then we get Avengers, which is the actual first Avengers movie. Not the first Avenger, the first Avengers movie, directed by known asshole Joss Whedon. Not a big fan of this dude, but he did a good job with this movie because Avengers 1 is a great movie. It was a historical movie. We had never seen anything like this. A team-up of superheroes that have come from their own movies, all from separate movies that never interacted with each other, all coming together for one gigantic team-up to face off with a big bad villain named Tom Hiddleston as Loki, who is so good in this film. Probably my favorite performance from him as this character until his own series. We'll get to that later. I really love this movie. This one does age well, unlike some of the other movies in Phase 1. I still think this is very watchable. The characters and the chemistry they all have of that original Avengers team is great. The action is good. It's a fun movie with a great pace. And this one will also go in A tier. I'm actually going to put it in front of Iron Man 1. Iron Man 3, the first movie after Avengers. It was a big movie to have to deal with the after effects of Avengers, especially the PTSD that Tony Stark was feeling after that. Definitely not the strongest film in the world, but definitely not the weakest film of the MCU. It's one of those middle tier movies. I think it has a good plot of stripping Tony Stark from the armor and letting him just be Tony and have to deal with problems as a human being. I enjoyed that aspect of this film. I like the plot with him and the kid. I kind of like the villain a lot more than other people did. I don't hate the Mandarin twist. I know a lot of other people did, but it surprised me, and that was the point, and I know a lot of people were thrown off by that, but I enjoy it. I like the action in this film. It's not the worst thing in the world. Jenna Ortega's in this movie, by the way. Interesting fact. It's fine. I'll put it at the top of C tier. I don't think it's in B, so we'll put it right there. Thor: The Dark World. For the longest time, people thought this was the worst movie in the MCU. Times have changed, huh? Oh, this is another one that's just kind of boring and forgettable. I think it's a little bit better than people actually give it credit for. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I enjoy the story of Thor and Natalie Portman's Jane in these movies. I think they have good chemistry and a good relationship here, and I like the idea of the Reality Stone and these dark elves that are trying to come and get it. I enjoy the final fight of this movie, which goes to London, and there's a bunch of cool ideas in this film. The moments with Loki are great, but this movie is just kind of dwindled down by a boring pacing, a boring, colorless, weird cinematography style, and just a lot of forgettable characters around the characters that we actually like. Thor: The Dark World will go in front of the original Thor. I'll put it behind Iron Man 3. Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the first truly great film from the MCU, a film that actually stands beyond anything else as being a truly remarkable superhero outing. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is more than just a superhero movie. It is a spy thriller, akin to something like the modern Mission Impossible films. A film that tells a great story with suspense, with twists and turns and great characters that aren't just flashy and comedic. Captain America is actually at pretty much the worst position he's ever been at. He's at odds with his own government in this film. Scarlett Johansson is a character who we didn't know if we could fully trust the Black Widow at this point, so you're kind of in suspense with her. You get your introduction to Anthony Russo as the Falcon. Sam Jackson, this is probably his best performance as this character. The villains here are really scummy and political. This is like Game of Thrones in the Marvel universe, or the closest that we'll ever get to it. This is a phenomenal movie with great action. Of course, you get the actual Winter Soldier, Bucky, and the relationship with him and Cap is a very important part of this film. We're gonna put Cap 2 in S tier, Winter Soldier in S tier, and it might stay number 1. We'll see. Because then we have Guardians of the Galaxy 1. The first outing from James Gunn in this universe, bringing on these characters that nobody at the time had ever heard of. Can you believe it? 10 years ago, nobody on this planet had ever heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Crazy how time flies. Now they have a roller coaster at Epcot. Who would have thought? This is a phenomenal movie, and James Gunn pulled off something truly special and truly spectacular in this film, taking unknown characters and making them a gigantic mega franchise. This movie is fun, it's exhilarating, it's hilarious, arguably the funniest movie of the MCU still to this day. Chris Pratt is so good as Starkiller. Zoe Saldana as Gamora, and her relationship with Starkiller is great. Obviously, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, all the characters in the movie are great, and I think Ronan is a very underrated villain. I love what they did with Ronan the Accuser in this film. I think he's a badass, and I think the final fight is one of the best of the MCU. This is peak superhero content. So we'll put Guardians 1 in S tier right behind Cap. What a year 2014 was for Marvel. Then we get Avengers 2, Avengers Age of Ultron, also directed by this dickhead Joss Whedon. Yes, Avengers Age of Ultron is a movie that everybody loves, right? Not really. It's arguably the worst Avengers movie. It's the argument that I hear from most people is that it is the worst Avengers movie. It's not a terrible movie. It's just one that's just kind of boring compared to the other Avengers films. Ultron feels watered down as a villain. He never feels like the giant threat that he actually feels like in the comics. Although I love James Spader voicing the character, I love his performance here, perfect casting, the character is just never that threatening. He's more threatening in the trailer than he is in the actual movie. The characters here do have that same chemistry from the first Avengers movie that works really well, but I don't think there are enough new additions to this team to make this film feel like a big gigantic sequel. It instead feels kind of like a weird part 2 to the first Avengers movie versus anything else. Although all of that is true, though, this is still a movie that I enjoy going back to sometimes. There are some good fight scenes and some good moments, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Age of Ultron will go... We'll put it B tier. Bottom B tier. I think it's better than anything in C tier, right? Then we have Ant-Man in 2015, another very surprising movie. The world's smallest hero, a hero that nobody had also ever heard of. Ant-Man, played by Paul Rudd. Michael Douglas being in this movie was great. Evangeline Lilly. This is a heist movie. It is a movie about a big heist, superhero heist movie. What a great idea. That came from Edgar Wright, who was supposed to make this movie. What a movie that would have been. There's so much good shit in this movie. It's one of the funniest MCU movies, Michael Pena being a standout. It's got a great plot. The actual heist elements work really well. I like the way they integrate the powers of Ant-Man. To me, this is easily the best version of Ant-Man we've ever gotten. It's the best Ant-Man movie. It's the best movie Ant-Man has appeared in, and it is one of the better MCU standalone films. Because of them, actually gonna put Ant-Man in the bottom of A tier. Captain America Civil War, one of the most hyped movies of all time, a movie that adapts one of the greatest comics of all time, the civil war between these characters. And although this is a very shrunken down version of that comic book storyline, it also introduced a lot of great things about the MCU. First off, it's kind of like a prologue to the big Avengers movies that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. It's a setup for that film. It's also one of the best performances from Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, as he is kind of the villain in this movie, but not really. He's at odds with Cap, and the fight scenes between them and the arguments are all great. You get the introduction of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, which has actually been kind of a world-changing casting and introduction. It was absolutely great to see. The final fight is awesome. It's an emotional movie, and this is one of the better films that we've gotten in the last 10 years from this Marvel era, I should say. Civil War goes at the top of A tier. I will leave it right behind Avengers. I think Avengers is a little bit better. Doctor Strange 1, the introduction of Doctor Strange as a character, is another movie that I really enjoy. Not the strongest solo outing we've gotten from the MCU, or solo movie, but still a very good movie, introducing us to Benedict Cumberbatch, who's perfectly cast as Stephen Strange, this kind of eccentric egomaniac who eventually learns what it's like to be a hero. The powers of Doctor Strange in this world of magic are easy to follow, and they do a great job of introducing you to that world. I really love the Great One and her whole arc. The villain here, extremely weak. The Dormammu stuff, kind of dumb in retrospect, but there's a lot that works about this movie, including its beautiful cinematography and visuals. It is one of the best looking films in the MCU. But there are just some stuff that drag it behind some of the other great solo films here. But I will put Doctor Strange at the top of B tier. Guardians Volume 2. This was a very difficult movie for them to make, of course coming off Guardians 1, which is a classic of a film. Guardians 2 follows the story of Chris Pratt, Star-Lord, as he finds his father, and it is a solid movie that has a lot of problems. The film has a structure that is just not as fluid and not as fun to follow as the first one. Now that all these characters know each other, we get past kind of the honeymoon phase of them meeting each other and that fun kind of onset of jokes that we get from the characters being first introduced and getting to know each other. Instead, we get a film that's more about family and Gamora and Nebula and them as sisters and Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana coming together as lovers and what a father-son relationship is. And there's a lot of stuff here that works, a lot of stuff that doesn't work that much. Of course, the father-son stuff definitely works with, you know, Yondu and all that. The music is still great here. I think the final fight is a little bit of a letdown until the very end of it. I think the last scene of this movie is one of the best last scenes in the entire MCU. But overall, kind of a forgettable one. We'll put Guardians 2 ahead of... Is it better than the first Avenger? I don't know. I don't know, we're gonna leave it below the first Avenger for now. Spider-Man Homecoming, the first Spider-Man movie in the MCU, the first Spider-Man movie after Amazing Spider-Man 2 that flopped at the box office. This is our first introduction to a younger, more vibrant Spider-Man, something we haven't really gotten. It is a straight-up comedy, high school film, and I enjoy this one. It's okay. It's probably my least favorite of the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, but it's still one that has a lot going for it. First off, Michael Keaton as the Vulture is a great villain. The actual high school vibes here are probably the closest thing we'll ever come to a truly comic book accurate Spider-Man story. I don't love a lot of the CGI in the film. I think the jokes sometimes are a little too cheesy and cringy, but the relationship between Spider-Man and Iron Man is awesome. Tom Holland's great in this role, and this is a good movie. As a good movie, it'll go right behind Guardians 2. Thor Ragnarok, Taika Waititi's masterpiece, I think, of his career. One of his best movies, to be completely honest with you. Thor Ragnarok takes the Thor character and flips him on his head and makes him a comedic mastermind. This is arguably the funniest movie in the MCU. I've said that a few times, but this one is truly maybe in that top 3 conversation. It's a film about Hela, Thor's sister that we did not know about, coming back and taking over Asgard, and Thor and Loki need to team up with a bunch of other people with the Hulk, and they have to go take down Hela. This is a phenomenal movie. It's fun, it's colorful, it's vibrant, there are so many great fights. Thor fighting the Hulk in a gladiator arena. The final fight is epic. Thor learning to be a king. This is a beautiful movie. I just wish that they handled some sort of the story threads in this movie better in the follow-ups. I don't think they did, but either way, I love Thor Ragnarok. This is like a top of A tier for me, like even above Avengers. I really, really like Ragnarok. Black Panther 1, the one and only movie we got of Black Panther starring Chadwick Boseman, which is something we never thought we would have to say, but unfortunately we do. Directed by Ryan Coogler, it's our introduction to Wakanda, to the world of Black Panther, and this was an incredibly iconic film, a film that is still iconic to this day. Chadwick Boseman is so good as this character. The world of Wakanda is built so thoroughly. The world building here is really beautiful. The visuals are great. This movie has one of the best soundtracks in all of the MCU, both in the music that it uses, as well as the actual score that was created for it. It's got a great villain in Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. Some extremely emotional moments, great fight scenes. I think this film has a little bit overuse of CGI. Like, it didn't need to be a big CGI fest, but a lot of it kind of is. But it's still a great movie. I will put it in A tier right below Avengers. Avengers Infinity War, the biggest movie of all time, in my opinion, because this movie had so much going for it. It was literally the 10-year buildup of the MCU to get to this point, to get to this movie, where all of these characters were going to team up to fight Thanos. And this movie is Thanos' movie. We follow Thanos as he's trying to collect all the Infinity Stones. The Avengers are scattered. They don't really have this joint team-up plot. And Thanos is this emotionally gripping character that has so much more depth than you would have ever thought if you just read the comic books. He's a character that has this purpose, who feels this purpose to fix the world, a world that many others wouldn't even see as broken, but he thinks there is an issue that needs to be fixed, and he doesn't care what he has to do to fix it, even if it's terrible, even if it's mass genocide. There's a weird understanding with his character, even though he's trying to do something so evil, and that's what makes this movie so beautiful, both in its actual action scenes, its fights, its music, and its character moments. This film does feel like one large action sequence. Its pacing is unbelievable. It's one of the best paced films ever. It flies by, and there's always something interesting happening on screen. It made the first viewing of this film just absolutely unbelievable. And the ending. What can you say about the ending that hasn't been said a billion times? It's brilliant. The music in this film is perfect. This, to me, is the perfect Marvel movie. I don't know if they've ever kind of made it back to this peak, at least for me, since this film has come out. This is everything you had ever wanted, that I had ever wanted as a kid to see in this universe, and luckily I was able to experience it at least once in the MCU with Avengers Infinity War. This is a perfect movie. I love it. And to be honest with you, I love it so much, it's going number 1 for now. We'll see if it stays there. Then we had Ant-Man and the Wasp, another film in this MCU that's very forgettable. It came out between Infinity War and Endgame, so of course it's a little bit forgettable, but it's a big team-up movie with Ant-Man and the whole Ant-Man family, of course, the Wasp, and it's kind of a weird, like, chase movie. There's this weird kind of building that every side wants. The building shrunk down, and, you know, Scott and his side, they have the building, and they're running around, and then the other side has the building, and they're trying to get Hope Van Dyne out from the Quantumverse. Just a very strange movie, though. The villain here is really not a villain. Everybody in this film is kind of just a good guy. There's no stakes, but it is a fun movie that I don't hate. There's really nothing egregious about this film. It's just so small, like Ant-Man himself, that it's so insignificant that you forget that it even happened. So we're gonna put it at the bottom of the B tier. Like, it's better than all of these movies, but it's not significant, like, at all. Captain Marvel, our introduction to Brie Larson's version of this character, a character that we were so excited to see on the big screen. We finally got the movie all the way back in 2018. We got Captain Marvel number 1, a movie that's set in the 90s or the 80s, something like that. It's another period piece that kind of makes Captain Marvel the original Avenger, technically. She is this super powerful, overpowered force of nature that unfortunately they just could not write an interesting or fun story story around or create a cool character out of. She is so boring. This movie in general is just another miss for Marvel. It's boring. It's just kind of relying on this idea that we would be so engulfed in the idea of Captain Marvel, this badass female warrior, that we would forget that this movie lacks any actual credible story or character element. Sam Jackson's here and he's great. Jude Law is fine. Brie Larson, probably her worst performance as the character. Thankfully, she got better as she did more of these films. I'm not a fan of this movie. There are some stuff I like about it. I like the music choices. I like some of the action scenes. Some of the cinematography is okay. But another one that's really forgettable and really just kind of bad. Not super bad, but just like bottom C tier bad. Endgame, Avengers Endgame, the big climax to the first saga of the MCU, a film that had so much going for it after the ending of Infinity War. To be honest, this is a movie that you either think is the greatest thing ever, or you're somebody that thinks, it's good, it's fine, it lived up to the hype, but it's not the best thing in the MCU. I'm the latter. I agree with that. I was super excited like everybody else to see this movie, and I was so satisfied when I actually saw it. Upon rewatches, though, I realized that this movie does a lot of stuff that I personally would not have liked them to do. I think the idea of using time travel to undo the ending of Infinity War, and I know it's not like typical time travel, it's a weird, unique spin on it, but still, I think it's a weird cop-out. I like the idea of the heroes losing and having to accept that defeat and find the best way to move on. That is a character element I have never really seen in a superhero film. This film instead tells you the message that, hey, just because you fucked up doesn't mean you can't go back in time and undo that fuck up. I don't really like that theme, and it's something that just always lingers with me over this film. Now, of course, it does a lot right. The final fight is beautiful. Thanos as a villain is still great. The characters have some of the best moments of the entire MCU here. You get the Avengers Assemble moment. You get the great ending with Tony, of course, and there's just so much going on in this film that I can't really say is bad or criticize at all. I just wish they had gone a different route from time travel and tried to be a little more creative in how they got out of the MacGuffin they put themselves into at the end of Infinity War. So Endgame will go in A tier, right above the first Avengers movie, but below Thor Ragnarok. Next up is Spider-Man Far From Home, the sequel to Homecoming, the second Spider-Man movie in the MCU, and a movie that I think is underrated. Only the second real film on this list that I actually think is underrated by people. I think it's a lot better than people think. I always see this movie ranked at the bottom of like Spider-Man ranked videos, Spider-Man tier list. I think it's one of the better Spider-Man films. It's a film that takes Spider-Man and it brings him to Europe, out of his comfort zone, and puts him up against one of my favorite Spider-Man villains in general, Mysterio. Amazingly played by Jake Gyllenhaal in this film, and a very unique kind of take on this character that is still faithful to what we know Mysterio to be. I think the action scenes and some of the scenes with Mysterio in this film are so creative and so thought-provoking in how they actually made them and thought of them. I think it's some of the best creative stuff in the MCU. I think Spider-Man as a character, this is one of his best character stories of really coming into his own and becoming the lead hero of the MCU. I actually think they kind of redid this story in No Way Home, at least from a thematical point of view, which is something I'll say about that movie when I talk more about it, some stuff that I didn't love about it. But Far From Home is still a great movie. I think not enough people give it the credit that it deserves. I love the final fight. It's one of my favorite final, like, third act Spider-Man films ever. So, Far From Home will actually go in A tier. It's better than Ant-Man. Ooh, do I want to be that guy? No, we're gonna put it behind Iron Man.
You're not that guy, pal, trust me.
And then we had like a full year break because something happened in what happened in 2020 again? But then early in 2021 we had WandaVision, the first MCU TV show, because we don't count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for some reason. Oh, I know why. It's because it sucks. Oh, I just pissed off all of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans, because I know there's like one or two of them out of the 7 billion people on this planet. WandaVision's great. I think it's maybe the best MCU show, and it was the first one, so bravo, Kevin Feige, keeping up the quality. I don't know if that's true, though. We'll figure it out as I talk about the other shows, but WandaVision is really great. It's a show that does a lot of interesting stuff. The first 3 or 4 episodes are actual sitcom episodes, putting us in this weird MCU sitcom-y world with Wanda and with Vision. And they're extremely well done and faithful to like each time period that they're trying to replicate, and the mystery that's built throughout them is so intriguing. This was really the last time that I was hooked into the MCU week by week, trying to theorize and figure out what's going to come next and what it means for the larger world. It really truly was a special experience that anybody that was watching the show as it was airing can attest to. It's a great show. I think its conclusion and its finale and the way that it kind of satisfies some of the big twists it set up are not that satisfying, but still, I enjoy the show for the most part, even though I probably will never go back and rewatch it, just because the fun part about the show is not knowing the twist, and once you know the twist, it's like, oh, that's kind of boring. WandaVision, though, will go in B tier ahead of First Avenger, behind Doctor Strange. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, one of the most forgettable shows in the MCU, but one that's not terrible. It's actually kind of fine. It's a show that is pretty much about Falcon, aka Sam Wilson, becoming Captain America after he was given the shield at the end of Endgame, and it's pretty much a 6-episode story of that, and of course, Winter Soldier, Bucky accepting the fact that he actually is a good guy. I enjoy the show. It's got a boring villain and a lot of boring episodes and really on-the-nose messaging that just does not really work, but it's got some really cool fight scenes spread throughout. I think Baron Zemo is such a great character, and Daniel Brühl does such a great job playing him, and he's so fun to see here. I also like kind of the direction they were going in with Sharon Carter and that weird city that she's in and ruling. We have not had a follow-up to that since, and I don't know if we ever will, but I enjoyed whatever they were doing there and where it was going to lead, and unfortunately we just might never see that. I like the final episode. I like the cap suit. The show is just really boring and forgettable. Oh, Wyatt Russell's here. I like his character. I can't wait to see him in Thunderbolts. But just kind of really boring and forgettable and like top of C tier. Yeah. Top of, in front of Iron Man 3. Black Widow, the first movie after COVID. Of course, the first movie about Black Widow, even though she's dead. Yeah, it's a prequel film. And one that doesn't feel necessary at all into the MCU, unless the entire point of this was just to introduce us to Florence Pugh's character, which... good job, I guess. Outside of the great opening of this film that is played on by a mix of a Nirvana song, this film just does not have a lot going for it. Everybody kind of expected it to be a Captain America Winter Soldier type spy thriller. Instead, it's a big, over-the-top CGI fest with a lot of cringy comedy. Too much CGI for a film that did not really need it, and a film that had a ridiculous budget. The CGI looks terrible. Taskmaster, completely wasted villain, because Taskmaster is so good in the comics. They kind of like Mandarin that son of a bitch, and it just did not work here. This film's not good. It's not memorable, and there's just really nothing to write home about, other than the opening, which I think is great. The opening of this film is excellent. This is gonna be the second D tier. What If? Now, I'm just gonna rank this as a whole, both Season 1 and Season 2 as a collected force. What If is great. It's a great idea. It takes the MCU into animation for the first time, and it's telling these unique stories. Each episode is its own brand new story. Some of them are really, really excellent. Like, I love the Doctor Strange episode. I love the Chadwick Boseman playing Black Panther, but he's like Starkiller. I love that, and we get a cool, unique version of Thanos there. There's a lot good here. There's also a lot of episodes that are forgettable and boring and has some shoddy voice acting, but as a whole, I like what this show did. I like how it built it up to a collected episode at the end, a big team-up, multiversal team-up episode. Season 2 I thought was a little weaker than Season 1, but this is still a great idea for a show, and one that I actually enjoy the hell out of. So What If will go right behind WandaVision in B tier. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This film feels like it just came out, and it's been like 3 years. That's crazy. Shang-Chi is a character I had never really heard of, and I had no expectations for this film, but thankfully it ended up being an actual great movie. A movie that I loved when I first saw it. It's not a perfect movie. It has a lot of the MCU problems, like shoddy CGI. It also kind of avoids having some of the MCU's other big problems. It doesn't have a villain problem. We get the actual version of the Mandarin here, and he is great. He is dark, scary, you know, actually threatening, but he's also the dad of Shang-Chi, so you feel that family vibe, that weird emotional connection, kind of like Gamora and Thanos. Shang-Chi is a great character. He could have really come off as just this boring, kind of regretful son out for revenge, but they choose to make him an actual human being with ties to both his father's society as well as, like, real-life America. He's got, you know, Aquafina as his best friend, and they go on this grand, big adventure. I love a lot of the combat in this movie. I love the visual style. So yet again, some of the CGI doesn't really work for me, but the villains are great. I like the third act, and I can't wait to see more of Shang-Chi. How has it been 3 years and we haven't seen him again? Shang-Chi's gonna go in A tier, but where do we put him? We'll put him right behind Black Panther. I can't put him in front of Black Panther. Come on, guys. I'm not gonna do that to my boy Chadwick. Rest in peace, man. Rest in peace. Eternals. Oh, we're putting that right in F tier. Yeah, Eternals is shit. It is the worst movie in the MCU so far that I have talked about. Eternals is not a good movie whatsoever. It is a long, drawn-out, boring mess of a film that I have never gone back to rewatch, and neither have you. Don't lie. It was directed by Chloe Zhao, who's actually a capable director. She actually has won Best Director at the Academy Awards, which they told us 1 billion times in the lead up to this movie. Just in case you forget, she won an Oscar. Yeah, well, not for this fucking movie. Eternals is just a disaster. It's a team up of a bunch of characters nobody had ever heard of, and unlike Guardians of the Galaxy, where James Gunn was able to get us invested in these characters in a comedic way very, very quickly, this movie instead doesn't organically bring you into the world of these characters. They just kind of throw you into the story, and all these characters are one-noted and boring and as shallow as they get. The world and the lore of the Eternals is not that cool. Actually, when you find out out who they are and why they are, it makes them less likable because they were just ignoring all these terrible things happening on Earth because it's their job to let things just transpire as they are. I couldn't even tell you who the villain of this movie is. I think the ending is kind of bad. They set up this big major thing in the MCU world that still hasn't been touched upon to this day, and it's just a mess of a film. There's really nothing redeemable about it. It's almost 3 hours long. Just why? Why was this made? Kit Harington's in it, though, and I like him. Jon Snow, baby. She's McQueen! Hawkeye, the most underrated TV show in the MCU. One that everybody shit on? I enjoy it. It's probably the closest thing we've gotten to like a PG version of the Netflix Marvel shows, and I was all here for it. It's a Christmas show about Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, brilliantly played by Haley Steinfeld, and I love the hell out of this one. It's a weird mystery crime thriller, small-time, street-level MCU. It's got some great villains in it. Florence Pugh shows up and has a great episode. You get Kingpin showing up. I don't love what they did with his character, but it was still cool to see him come into the MCU for the first time, telling us all that the Netflix shows do matter and they're going to make their way into the MCU. I love Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, and he finally gets his standout moment, and Kate Bishop is just a great character. Can't wait to see more of her. So Hawkeye will go right behind WandaVision and B tier. Spider-Man No Way Home, time to piss some people off. If we're just going off of movie theater experiences and film experiences, S tier. Seeing this movie for the first time was the greatest movie theater experience I've ever had in my life. As a longtime Spider-Man fan who theorized about this movie all year, it was the most satisfying thing in the world. But judging it as a film, years later, judging it just as a structural movie, it's okay. The best parts of this movie thematically and story-wise are treading back on some themes that were already satisfied in previous Spider-Man movies. So because of that, this film is just kind of a retelling of a story that we've already sort of gotten. This film is built around its cameos, and yeah, they're great. Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, they're amazing. The villains are incredible to see, and Tom Holland gives his best performance as the character. We get a great plot with Aunt May. Zendaya is awesome here. The music is brilliant. The cinematography is the best in this trilogy. But the plot on rewatches, after you get over the excitement of the cameos, the plot is just not as thick, it's not as meaty and juicy as it was, so it comes down a few tiers. It's not S tier, I wouldn't even say it's A tier. But I would say it's like the top of B tier, right? I think yeah. I could feel all of you clicking in the comments telling me how fucking stupid I am. Moon Knight, one of the most forgettable shows in the MCU. I completely forgot this even existed, especially because they haven't followed up on it. Moon Knight could have been really cool. It could have been this really dark, rated R take on this character, which I think maybe in a season 2 we'll get that now that the MCU is willing to do R-rated stuff. Instead, we get a really goofy sort of solo outing. Oscar Isaac giving his absolute all to this character. Love his performance, but after you get around how great his performance here, there's nothing much to go on. Ethan Hawke is playing a boring villain that was underutilized. The CGI here is way too much. There are twists in the show that are somewhat satisfying, other twists that are left hanging. You never really get a satisfying answer to any of those, and overall it's just really forgettable and not that good. So Moon Knight will go in C tier. It's better than these movies, I think. Yeah, we'll put it right behind Iron Man 3. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Disappointment, the most disappointing movie of the modern MCU, but a movie that's still okay. This movie was built up as being Spider-Man No Way Home on steroids. You were gonna get cameos, you were gonna get literally the Multiverse of Madness. Instead, you get the multiverse of one universe. That's kind of cool. Maybe, not really. Doctor Strange is the worst part about this movie. Benedict Cumberbatch gives his all, but the character is just boring and doesn't really kind of transcend into anything new. Wanda's a good villain. She's threatening. I just feel like maybe she could have been utilized in a bigger movie as a villain. Here, she just kind of feels like it was just thrown together so quickly. America Chavez is a good new character. I enjoy her. Her powers are really cool. Seeing, like, the Fantastic Four with John Krasinski's Mr. Fantastic was a decent twist. Patrick Stewart coming back was cool, but there are just not enough... But there just isn't enough in this movie to really get you excited. The pacing is just all over the place. It's a little bit too long, and ultimately it ends up being way more forgettable than I think they intended this to be. I think they wanted this to be one of the biggest films in the MCU to this point. Seeing Sam Raimi direct a Marvel film, though, that was pretty cool. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness will go right in front of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Top of C tier, if I can get it. There you go. Miss Marvel! Shit! F tier, baby, right in front of... Actually, no, F tier at the bottom. The sad thing about the show is Iman Vellani is actually so good as Miss Marvel, as the character here. She is so much fun in this role. It's so much better in her next outing we'll talk about. But the show is a nothing ball. It's a bunch of episodes of boring nonsense, of terrible CGI, of a bad villain, of really bad action scenes, a backstory that nobody cares about, side characters that nobody cares about, and ultimately this is the most unwatchable thing in the MCU in my opinion. It is just not very good, but it's not insulting. There's going to be one movie at least that ranks below this one, because this doesn't at least insult my intelligence. It's a show that was clearly not made for me, therefore I did not enjoy it at all. and I just also don't think it's very good when it comes to how it was made. Thor: Love and Thunder. This one is also just not good at all. Taika Waititi, who was on fire with Thor Ragnarok, and then, of course, Jojo's Rabbit, a big Oscar movie. He was on fire. He could have made whatever the hell he wanted. Instead, he makes this movie. He makes Thor 4, Thor: Love and Thunder, one of the most anticipated movies of last year, and it shit the bed. I wanted to love this movie so much, and unfortunately, I just didn't. It's a movie that just kind of sucked, and that's unfortunate. We get comedic Thor back, except this time he's like so comedic that it's not funny at all. We get Natalie Portman back, except she's a joke of what her character used to be. We get a villain played by Christian Bale, who's actually kind of cool and interesting at times, but just ultimately underutilized and boring. And this movie is just that. It's kind of boring. The CGI is bad. The comedy is so goofy that it's too much. It doesn't have as many creative ideas as Ragnarok had. And this felt like Taika Waititi just getting a paycheck. So Thor: Love and Thunder will go at the top of F tier. She-Hulk, also not very good. Wow, the MCU's been struggling. A show about She-Hulk. It's the Hulk, but she's a chick and a lawyer. There's a lot about the show that I actually think could have worked. I like the idea of a lawyer in the MCU kind of defending superheroes, and at times that could be interesting. Seeing Daredevil was cool until you realize that they had MCU'd him, and he was just comedic nonsense. I like the final episode because it felt like they realized how bad this show was, and we're just like, well, fuck it, I guess we're just gonna make fun of ourselves. But another one, just terrible CGI, terrible everything. And then we have Werewolf by Night, a weird little short film that they did as a Halloween special, and I enjoy this one. It's a nice little story about a bunch of these weird monster-type characters coming together, and there's like a hunt in this mansion. I don't really remember too much about it because it's been years since I've watched it, but I would like to see them do more of these like little shorts to maybe test out and introduce some new characters quickly. Instead of doing like whole ass shows about them, like instead of doing a whole show about Agatha, maybe they could have just done like one of these things. I'll put it in the middle of C tier. Yeah, it's just okay. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, the hardest movie in the MCU to make because they had to make it after the passing of Chadwick Boseman, and how the hell do you do that? Honor his legacy, honor the world of Black Panther, and actually do a good movie. Given the circumstances, I think they did a tremendous job with this one. I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is a great film. Following Shuri, of course, the sister of Black Panther, who becomes this new Black Panther in this movie, we face off with Namor, the main villain of this film, who leads a very Wakanda-like civilization underwater. And there's this big sort of vibranium war going on between the two cultures, and it's beautiful, and there's a great revenge story here, and they handle the passing of Chadwick Boseman, the passing of the Black Panther, so well in this film. It is one of the most emotional films in the MCU. Everybody in my movie theater, I remember seeing this for the first time, shed at least one tear, definitely near the end of the film. It's a beautiful movie. A lot of CGI and overuse of CGI, but great music, and just a very underrated MCU movie. One that I think gets a lot more hate than it should have. This is legitimately one of the hardest movies, I think, in the history of Hollywood that anybody had to make, and I think they did a damn good job with it. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is actually going to go in the A tier. I'm going to put it right behind Iron Man. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Yeah, this movie is atrocious, and it's the insulting film I was talking about. This is a film that had a lot of hype around it because it was supposed to be kind of like the big jumping off point of the Multiverse saga. You have the introduction of Kang, like official introduction of Kang. You have Ant-Man, who's a great character, getting to be on a big stage and have a gigantic movie. The whole movie's taking place in the quantum realm. You get Catherine Newton being introduced as the older version of Scott's daughter. This movie is just boring. It's long. The CGI is atrocious. The CGI is atrocious. This is the worst looking film in the MCU. Everything that worked about these characters in the previous two Ant-Man films is just kind of watered down and just nowhere near as deep as it was before. Just the comedy is atrocious. Kang as a villain is okay at times, but yet again, Jonathan Majors isn't even coming back because he ruined his career, so who cares? The ending of this film is a disaster. Them beating Kang is a hilarious joke, and the after credit scenes, although kind of cool, just yet again, he's gone. Kang's not coming back, at least that version, so who gives a shit? Oh, this movie's terrible. In my opinion, it's the worst thing in the MCU ever. It's terrible. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. What a movie. What a finale to the Guardians of the Galaxy universe, to the world of Guardians of the Galaxy that James Gunn brought on. He promised a finale that was both satisfying and left the door open for Kevin Feige to continue using these characters, and he delivered. What a great film. That focuses on Rocket Raccoon and his origin story, the one little piece that we hadn't gotten from these characters, and it's as emotional as it gets. The movie's sad, it's fun, it's vibrant, it's dangerous, it's suspenseful, it has everything you like from Guardians of the Galaxy. It brings these characters back for one last kind of journey and adventure throughout the galaxy. We see all these cool locations that we hadn't seen before. A lot of great characters are brought into this film. I love the villain here, he's great. I love the third act of this movie, and the ending is beautiful. The dog days are over. They definitely are. What a dance scene. It's the greatest dance scene in the history of movies. I do wish some of the characters had a more final ending. Some of the characters we know aren't coming back. I wish there was more finality in their finish. But still, to this day, I love this film. It's one that I've gone back and rewatched, and it's great. This one will go in A tier. We'll put it right behind Endgame, ahead of the original Avengers. Actually, no. We'll put ahead of Black Panther, but under the original Avengers. In the holiday special, I don't really remember this too much. I guess I'll just put it at the bottom of D tier, C tier. I don't remember anything about this, so correct me if I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's S. I don't know. Secret Invasion, a show that everybody seemed to hate, a show that could have been great. I love the Secret Invasion storyline. I think it's really cool. This shape-shifting race of aliens coming to Earth and pretending to be some of the characters that we love. That's a cool storyline. I think this show could have been done bigger in a movie with some of the big Avengers characters. Instead, we get a Sam Jackson, Nick Fury, led project here that at times is great. At times is the spy thriller we all want, with great characters like Ben Mendelsohn, who comes back and reprises his role as a Skrull. You have Emily Clark, who's here and is great, and a really good villain, actually. But the show is just kind of dull and boring and lacks that depth that a lot of the other original MCU content used to have. It doesn't really feel like it's meaningful in the grand scheme of things, and it feels directionless almost. But there is some good stuff here. There is some stuff that I enjoyed about this show, so it's definitely not near the bottom of these tiers. Instead, it's a C tier. I'll put it ahead of Iron Man 3, right below Falcon and Winter Soldier. Loki! Now we're going to be ranking the Season 1 and Season 2, even though I think there's kind of a different... I think Season 1's a lot better, let me just put it that way. But Loki as a whole is the best show that the MCU has produced. It's great. Of course, Tom Hiddleston back as the character, who's great. We get the introduction of the TVA, which is an awesome group, a great concept that has really kind of brought together this multiverse. You get more of Kang, kind of, in Season 2. In Season 1, definitely, and he's awesome, even though Jonathan Majors, yet again, not coming back. There's a lot about Season 2 I don't love. I love the ending of Season 2, but overall, this 2-season plotline is really good. It's a great show with a well-thought-out plot, and I'm happy it's made, and I think it's the best thing they've done on TV so far with the MCU. So, it will go right in front of WandaVision in B tier. The Marvels, a movie that everybody hated. I even hated it, even though it's not that bad. Marvels is fine. It's of course a team-up movie between these three characters that haven't really gotten the spotlight. It's a movie that pissed off Brie Larson because she thought it should have been called Captain Marvel 2, but well, sorry, Brie, but you kind of sucked in that movie, so you now have to split screen time. This movie is saved by Iman Vellani, who's so much fun. She gives a fantastic performance, and Miss Marvel is a great character and so great here. I hope they actually do her justice in the future. Brie Larson is better in this movie. She's actually fun and unique, and her character's a lot better here. This movie just has a boring villain, a forgettable plot. It's short, at least, so that's nice. It flies by with its pacing, but just a movie that really didn't need to be made. It could have been like a 30-minute short film, but instead it's a big, gigantic MCU film, and it bombed at the box office because nobody cares anymore. So yeah, it'll be bottom of C tier. Yeah, we'll just put it in front of Captain Marvel and these crappy Phase 1 movies. Yeah, there you go, that works. Echo, the weird kind of R-rated MCU show we got at the beginning of this year, a very short show, following the character of Echo from Hawkeye, and this was a weird one. Echo does a lot right. I think the character of Echo is actually interesting and dark and brutal and has kind of an interesting quest ahead of her, this weird revenge quest. And the world of like this gang warfare that she's getting involved in is interesting. I just think as the show gets into like its supernatural elements, it's not as cool, and I think it should have leaned more into the Daredevil Netflixy vibes that you sometimes get in the show, but it's like kind of afraid to dip its toes all the way in, and I think we will get that sort of vibe in future sort of MCU TV shows. But Echo's good. I mean, it's an enjoyable show. It doesn't do too much wrong. I don't have that much to complain about with it. So we'll go C tier for this as well, and we'll put it right in front of Secret Invasion. X-Men 97. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't watched all of this. I've only watched a few episodes, but I've enjoyed it. So for now, we're just gonna put it, I guess, at the back of B tier, because I know a lot of people would probably say this is like S tier. Some other people might say C tier, but I'll put it at the back of B just because I haven't finished it. And finally, Deadpool and Wolverine, the brand new film that just came out. I released 2 videos on it the last couple days, a review and then a spoiler review, and if you've seen those, you know that I am in the minority of opinion on this film. It was a little bit disappointing. I expected something big and great, and another great, fun Deadpool film that was character-driven and very much had a very thick plot to sink your teeth into, other than the fact that it was just a comedy. It's a goofy, fun comedy. This is a film that I think relies too much on surprise value. It has a Wolverine that just has no depth to his character. The stuff in his past and his character's motivations are just so predictable, and I just wish they could have done more with it. Although the performances are great, Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman are amazing, their chemistry together is amazing. The villain here is boring and forgettable. A lot of the action scenes, some of them are really good, some of them are really not so good. The CGI, some of it looks great, a lot of it doesn't look very great. The music is kind of a problem. There are so many songs used throughout this movie, some used brilliantly, like the Madonna song, others not so much. It's just a weird mess of a film. There are high highs and low lows, and therefore it's just kind of like a middle-tiered film. Matthew McFadden's in it, though. He's the best part of the film. I love Matthew McFadden.
Buckle up, fucklehead.
So we will put Deadpool and Wolverine at the top of C tier. I think it's better than all of these, but it ain't better than any of these. So that's the list. Look at that. You can pause and see that. It looks kind of like a penis. Yeah, it looks like a penis. I've made a penis of MCU. And as you can see, you know, I enjoy the MCU. There's a lot of movies here that I love, some movies that I don't love so much. It's a mixed bag. But yeah, that's my opinion. Let me know your opinion down below. Let me know your opinion on all 50,000 of these. You can list them out, or just list your favorite ones and your least favorite ones. Why not? Make it easier for me. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, turn on notifications. I post every single day. I'll see you guys in the next one.